Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on Threat Hunting Exposed, a deep dive into proactive cybersecurity. This is part of our monthly webinar series to showcase the stratagem thought leadership that we are famous for here in Canada and globally. That being said, I want to move to the next slide and share a little bit more about who we have joining us today. With us on the call, we have Tala Iqbal, the Director of Cyber Intelligence Center at Stratagem. And with Tala, we have Sandeep Yadav, who is the Vice President of Integrated Solutions and Professional Services at Stratagem. I'm Nasreen Shams, the Assistant Vice President of Business Development at Stratagem, and very happy to have everybody on the call today. I'll walk you through a quick agenda as to what the show looks like today, and we'll hand it over to the experts. So a little bit on the introduction to threat hunting. What makes it a game-changing proposition for organizations? How are we able to help proactively detect and mitigate emerging threats before they become critical incidents? As well, threat hunting process and workflow. We'll walk through a bit of the technical background there. Threat hunting frameworks and methodologies. We'll talk about the differences between indicators of compromise and indicators of attack. As well, we'll talk about threat hunting tools and techniques, the data sources behind the threat hunting itself, the threat hunting use cases, which Stratagem is famous for in terms of the decade of experience we have in building those, and as well, hunting in the cloud environments, automation and AI and threat hunting. And lastly, the interesting, exciting part is the live demo on threat hunting and the case study. So with that being said, I want to invite everybody to put any questions you have in the chat. We will be answering them live, and please be interactive. So any questions you have, you can put them in. We'll stop the presentation if needed. If not, we'll address all those questions at the very end of the presentation. With that being said, here is Tala and Sandeep.
Thank you, Nasreen. I'll kickstart the presentation, and by all means, feel free to put your questions in the chat. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about threat hunting. The funny thing about threat hunting is it's often used as a marketing buzzword in cybersecurity. But today, we'll explore what it actually entails and how organizations can stay ahead by adopting this proactive approach. Now, threat hunting is critical to organizations, but it's often overlooked. It's overlooked because threats are becoming more sophisticated. Threat actors are bypassing traditional security measures, and this is where threat hunting comes into play. Unlike reactive security, where we wait for alerts and incidents to trigger a response, threat hunting is more proactive approach, right? So it involves searching for hidden threats. It involves actively looking for anomalies and threats that are lurking within your system before they can cause harm. So let's jump into our first topic, which is a quick introduction. What exactly is threat hunting? Think of threat hunting as cybersecurity's version of detective work, right? This is where we analyze behaviors, we detect stealthy attacks, and we stay one step ahead of our malicious actors. So let's explore some key topics. Why threat hunting matters? Well, we know that traditional security tools, they rely on known threats and known signatures, whereas proactive threat hunting detects hidden, sophisticated attacks before they can cause harm. So while detection using traditional security controls, they work well, right? They highlight and uncover well-documented threats. They discover known threat patterns. But it also leaves organizations vulnerable to sophisticated attacks, which involves evolving threat vectors and evolving exploits. Now, threat hunting, taking a proactive approach, we don't wait for an alert to trigger. We don't wait for an incident to be discovered. We're actively looking for hidden threats that would otherwise go unnoticed. So this is crucial to identifying advanced persistent threats. This is crucial to identifying stealthy attackers, right? So how does threat hunting differ from traditional incident response? As I mentioned earlier, threat hunting is a proactive measure, right? So we don't wait for an alert to trigger. We are proactively looking for indicators of compromise. We are proactively looking for indicators of an attack. Whereas incident response is a reactive measure. We respond to confirmed security breaches after the detection. Incident response is important because incident response allows us to respond to an incident, contain and mitigate the damage. It's essential because we know that attackers could have infiltrated the system. They might have stolen data, they might have caused system disruptions, but it's essential for organizations to combine both proactive and reactive security measures, which means a combination of threat hunting and incident response to strengthen your overall cyber resilience. Now let's talk about some challenges in today's threat landscape. We know that advanced persistent threats, APT attackers, also zero-day attacks, and sometimes insider threats, they use advanced evasion techniques, which means that they're difficult to detect. Now, if you look at the modern threat landscape, it's constantly evolving. It makes security more challenging. So APT threat actors they're stealthy, right? They are prolonged attacks designed to infiltrate networks, and they remain undetected for a longer period of time. Similarly, zero-day attacks. Zero-day attacks exploit unknown vulnerabilities before patches are available, which makes it extremely difficult to detect and extremely difficult to identify and stop. Now, an insider threat, they understand your internal detection capabilities. They understand your internal security control. Hence, they pose a significant risk. These challenges makes it critical to adopt a proactive stance through threat hunting. So this is why threat hunting is important, because we need to identify that needle in the haystack. We need to look for those zero-day attacks. We need to look for those APT, advanced persistent threat actors, and insider threats. Now, we also need to understand if there are any limitations of reactive security measures. We know that many organizations rely on reactive security measures using traditional security controls, which is to identify threats after they have incurred some damage or after they have incurred some harm onto your systems or onto your network. Now, cyber criminals, they constantly innovate. They're using new techniques, they're using new tactics to bypass your traditional defenses, which means that a delayed response increases the risk of damage. So once an attacker infiltrates a system, every minute counts. The longer they remain undetected, the more information they can steal, the more damage they can cause. This is why reactive security alone is no longer sufficient. It must be complemented with proactive threat hunting. Now, what's the value add of proactive threat hunting? One of the biggest benefits of proactive threat hunting is reducing the dwell time, or the time the attackers have spent residing on my network, residing on my system. The length of time they remain undetected within my network is important. The longer an attacker stays in the system, the greater the risk of data breaches, the greater the risk of financial loss, the greater the brand reputational damage, right? Because the longer they stay in my system, in my network, they can do reconnaissance, they can scan for sensitive data, they can plan their next steps in exfiltrating that data. So by actively searching for those hidden threats, organizations can identify and remove those attackers before they cause serious harm. So to improve your overall security resilience, allowing businesses to respond to threats in an effective manner, threat hunting combined with reactive incident response approach strengthens your security posture by continuously adapting to emerging threats rather than waiting for attacks to happen. So we know what threat hunting is. We know why it's important. Now, what's the process? We need to have a structured workflow to threat hunt, right? So the process starts with a hypothesis. We then collect the relevant data, analyze the relevant data, investigate the suspicious activity, and then respond to the threats. Now, we need to continuously improve on this process. We need to continuously evolve our security measure. So by following a cycle, a defined workflow, organizations can detect and neutralize threats before they can cause harm. So over the next few slides, we will explore these steps in more detail. We start with the hypothesis, right? This is where we form the initial hypothesis, which could be based on multiple factors, such as threat intelligence. It could be based on anomaly detection. It could be based on known attack patterns. This approach is often driven by the threat actor's behavior. We can identify those behaviors by looking at the MITRE ATT&CK framework. The premise is that every hunt starts with a question, which builds your hypothesis: where might an attacker be hiding? Hence, security teams should use a combination of external threat intelligence, internal security and event log data, historical incidents or past incidents, known incidents, to develop a targeted hypothesis. Instead of blindly searching, we should focus on specific attack vectors. We should focus on specific vulnerabilities. We should focus on what is most likely to be exploited. For example, if threat intelligence suggests that a particular malware is targeting organizations in a specific industry, the threat hunter can then hypothesize that similar activity could be present in their environment. The adversary tactics, techniques, and procedures, or the TTPs from MITRE ATT&CK framework can help us define that hypothesis, can help us look for specific behaviors, specific tactics and techniques, ensuring that the threat hunting is orderly and focused. Now, we then move to understanding the specific methodology. We know that advanced persistent threat actors, they evade detection for longer periods. We know that stealthy malware can operate without triggering standard alerts. We know that insider threats use legitimate credentials to bypass defenses. So we need to understand system behavior. We need to understand those tactics, those techniques, those procedures, and then look at our system behavior, look at our file processes to see if those behaviors exist in our environment or not. Next, we have to collect the right data and we have to analyze the right data. So once a hypothesis is formed, we then collect and analyze data from multiple sources. Now, this data can include your system event logs. This data can include network traffic. This data can include telemetric data from endpoint and system behavior, right? We can use tools like a SIEM solution, security information and event management tool. We can use an EDR solution, which is endpoint detection and response tool. And we can also incorporate some forensics tools, which play a crucial role in identifying certain behavioral-based anomalies. Now, when we're running threat hunting, we are aggregating and examining vast amounts of security telemetry data to uncover those hidden threats. Now, how do we identify those threats? This is where we move into the threat identification phase. This is where we correlate findings to detect indicators of compromise or indicators of an attack. How we achieve that is by mapping the observed behavior, mapping the observed indicators against known attacker tactics, known attacker techniques and procedures. This is where threat hunting transitions from a hypothesis to a concrete evidence, identifying malicious behavior, identifying suspicious behavior, and mapping it to previously known attack vectors. Now, indicators of compromise are forensics artifacts, right? So these are indicators that have been observed in previous incidents, in similar attack vectors, such as malware signatures, file hashes, malicious IPs, malicious domains, so on and so forth. Now, indicators of attack is the intent of the attacker. So rather than looking at known signatures, we're trying to identify the behavior. We are trying to look for indicators that may alert us of suspicious behavior, such as elevation of privilege, such as lateral movement within the network, right? So those behaviors, along with IOCs, indicators of compromise, will allow us to identify a specific attack vector, identify the tactic, techniques, and the procedures that are being used by these threat actors. Now, once a threat is identified, now we need to move into our incident response process. Now we need to immediately respond and mitigate. This involves isolating the impacted system, making sure that we block the malicious activity, implementing the appropriate security controls to prevent future occurrence of that instance. Now, detection is only half the battle, right? We need to eradicate and mitigate and contain the incident or contain the threat. Containment could simply be isolating a system. Eradication is as simple as removing the malicious file, disabling unauthorized user accounts, right? Or removing unauthorized assets from your system, from your network. Now, we can also take it one step further by implementing new prevention policies, right? So updating your security policies, updating access control list, updating endpoint protection configuration, and applying the learnings from the detection, right, from your threat hunt, looking at the IOCs and adding that to your security control so that they can be blocked. keep in mind that the hunting process is not a one-time activity. It's a continuous cycle of intelligence-driven investigations and proactive detections. Now, we will look at established frameworks and methodologies, which allows us to effectively threat hunt. By following these established structured approaches, it's easy for organizations to ensure consistency, efficiency, and accuracy in their threat hunting efforts. So we'll look at some structured frameworks. The more famous ones are the MITRE ATT&CK framework or the cyber kill chain, right? They provide security teams with a systematic approach to tracking threat behavior. And by leveraging these models, organizations can proactively detect and respond to threats with more accuracy and better efficiency. So let's first take a look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework. MITRE ATT&CK framework is an industry standard framework mapping adversary behavior to help threat hunters identify attack patterns and anticipate the behavior of the threat actor, anticipate their threat movements. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is a globally recognized knowledge base. It classifies real-world adversary tactics. It has techniques and procedures that security professionals can map to in a structured way to analyze attacker behavior. Now, the benefits of using MITRE ATT&CK framework is threat visibility. You know exactly how threat adversaries operate across different attack phases. You can map and prioritize the security gaps based on the mechanisms that are incorporated by these threat actors. You can also learn from that by looking at your security controls and identifying if there are any gaps in your security posture, right? And you can enhance your detection and response controls by mapping your internal use cases alerts to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. For example, if an organization suspects lateral movement, we can then look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which provides a common list of tactics and techniques that are used for lateral movement. This allows your threat hunters to pinpoint the signs of malicious activity. In another example, we can look at, let's say someone suspects a ransomware attack, right? So they can refer to the attack matrix and the MITRE ATT&CK framework to track how similar threats operate, right? How is the malware delivered onto my system? What tactics and techniques are used to execute that malware and evade defenses? This will further allow me to help pinpoint the malicious activity faster. Now, and next, let's look at the tactics, techniques, and procedures. The tactics, techniques, and procedures are a structured approach on identifying high-level attack objectives, which are called tactics. Then the specific methods or the specific methodology used in an attack, which are called techniques. And then the real-world implementation or the real-world procedures, right? So threat hunters should rely on the tactics, techniques, and procedures to understand how attackers operate in order to predict their next move. Tactic is the overall goal of an attack, right? This is an indicator of initial access, privilege escalation, or data exfiltration, right? That's the goal. Then we look at the specific techniques. Techniques are how do you accomplish that goal? So do we initiate the attack through a phishing email? Do we initiate the attack through a brute force attack? Do we initiate the attack using credential dumping, right? And then we look at the procedures. What are the real world implementations? How are these tactics and techniques used by specific threat actor groups based on historical incidents, right? So security teams can then move beyond static indicator and they can look beyond IP addresses, file hashes to understand the underlying behavior that typically remains consistent and constant across different attack vectors. Now, next, let's look at one of my favorite, which is the cyber kill chain. This is developed by Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin developed the cyber kill chain, which gives a step-by-step breakdown of an attack lifecycle. So we look at the 7 stages of an attack, starting with reconnaissance, and then weaponizing. So malware or exploits are developed. Delivery, how the malware, weaponized malware is delivered to the target, right? Whether it's through email, web, or other vectors. Exploitation, so are we exploiting or targeting any specific vulnerabilities? Then execution or installation, how are we establishing persistence to that system? Then we look at communication to command and control. And then the actions on objectives, right? So data theft, right? Disabling security controls, whatever the case may be. So understanding the cyber kill chain allows us to understand how we can prevent a successful attack. Now, The last two items I have are indicator-based and behavioral-based threat hunting, right? Indicator-based threat hunting is pretty standard. That's your IOCs, indicators of compromise, such as malicious IP address, file hashes, domains, known threats, known attack vectors, right? Then we have our behavioral-based threat hunting, which is looking for unusual login activity, unexpected network communication, abnormal process execution, right? These are more behavior-based rather than known static indicators. And last, I want to talk about threat intelligence-driven threat hunting, right? This is where we look at threat intelligence to predict and uncover emerging threats, looking at real-time threat data, analyzing real-time attack patterns, right? Identifying the threat actor groups, enriching your threat hunts with external intelligence sources such as deep dark web monitoring, dark web insights, or security vendor reports on what might be risky areas for your organization. So to kind of summarize this, threat hunting is most effective when it's supported by structured frameworks, right? When it's supported by defined methodologies. We can leverage MITRE ATT&CK framework. We can leverage the cyber kill chain. We can look at tactics, techniques, and procedures. We can look at behavioral-based detection, IOC-based detection, IOA-based detection, and we can leverage cyber threat intelligence to proactively discover and counterattack these threat vectors and enhancing your detection and response capabilities. Now, we talked a lot about indicators of compromise, behavior-based attack vectors. We talked about indicators of attack. What exactly are the indicators of compromise, right? While both indicators of compromise and indicators of attack play a significant role in threat hunting, over the next slide, we will break down the differences between the two, right? When it comes to detecting cyber threat, security teams rely on two primary types of indicators, the indicators of compromise and an indicator of an attack. Now, an indicator of compromise, these are forensics artifacts. They signal that a security breach has already occurred, right? They are your typical reactive measures, meaning that they help security teams analyze past incidents. They help security teams contain the damage after the fact, right? An example of an IOC could be malicious IP address, right? Indicators tied to known phishing domains, indicators tied to known command and control servers, indicators tied to known file malware, file hash malware, right? Suspicious registry changes, unusual outbound traffic. Now, there are some limitations when it comes to IOCs, right? IOCs are reactive in nature. That means if you discover an IOC, it means that an attack has already occurred, right? IOCs can easily be changed by threat actors, right? So cyber criminals, they are frequently modifying malware signatures, they're frequently modifying the IP addresses, they're frequently changing the IOCs so they become less effective against sophisticated threats. IOAs, on the other hand, they are behavioral-based patterns, right? Unlike IOCs, indicators of attack are focused on identifying attacker behavior and attacker tactics, right? So they're not looking at known signatures. They're more of an early warning detection and a significant piece of proactive threat hunting. For example, we're looking at unusual elevation of privileges, right? So an attacker attempting to gain admin level access on a system. We're trying to identify lateral movement across the network, which means that someone is moving between devices and servers to expand their control. We're looking at repeated authentication failures, right? So that could indicate a brute force or a credential stuffing attack. We're looking at malicious PowerShell script execution, right? Which could be suspicious in nature because it could be an unauthorized activity performed in an unauthorized directory for a specific function. Now, there are some advantages of using indicators of attack rather than indicators of compromise. Indicators of attacks, they operate they don't operate on fixed indicators, right? Behavior might change. Now, security teams, they need to be proactive in their approach, right? Which means that you need to detect and mitigate zero-day threats. You need to identify advanced persistent threat actors, and you need to understand evolving attack techniques. Now, why indicators of attacks are essential for proactive security? Well, indicators of attacks enable real-time threat detection, right? Indicators of attack focuses on the adversary behavior rather than after the fact, rather than an indicator of compromise that such an activity have already occurred. Now, understanding the difference between the indicators of compromise and indicators of attack is crucial, but integrating both IOCs and IOAs allows you to further strengthen your security posture, right? So we'll need to explore both IOCs and incorporate IOAs, indicators of compromise and indicators of attack, in your ecosystem to proactively threat hunt. Now, if you look at some real world examples, right? IOCs in action. So let's take an example of a company's firewall detecting repeated connection to a known malicious IP. This indicates that a system internal to my network is attempting to communicate with an external threat actor. It's most likely part of a ransomware campaign, right? So the security team finds the IP and they can then block that IP on their firewall, right? Now they can map a known malware file hash, or it could be a Trojan, in an endpoint protection scan, right? So they scan the system, identify a known malware hash. This suggests that the malware has already been installed on the system, right? Or it could be an employee flagging communication with a known command and control server, right? Which means that the attacker has already compromised and taken control of your machine. Now, if we compare that with an IOA, indicator of an attack, I can use an example where a user account with no admin privileges all of a sudden gain elevated access and starts modifying system security settings. This is a strong indication of privilege escalation, and it's a common step in cyber attacks. Similarly, we see a script being launched through PowerShell, right, to disable endpoint security tools. This behavior is often associated with fileless malware, right, which operates without leaving any traditional signatures or any trace behind. We can also look at a system process that is attempting to access sensitive files outside of its normal function. These are all behavior-based observations, right? So by monitoring indicators of attack, you can conclude that there is an active threat within your environment, right? So you can prevent that threat before it causes more harm, before it gets fully executed and steals data or causes more damage to your organization. Now, I have two more examples before we move on to specific tools and techniques. In this example, we have a reactive detection method, right? So we're looking at a company security team that discovers that an employee credentials were found in a known data breach dump on the dark web, right? So we can use threat intelligence sources to monitor the employee accounts or domains to see if there are any leaked credentials, right? So this may suggest that the employee account may have been compromised. So the IOC has been identified, right? The credential match a previously leaked password from a breach database. What should be our response to it? Well, reset the compromised password, make sure that the user account is protected with MFA, and educate the user not to use similar passwords for multiple accounts, right? Now, there are some limitations. These actions can only be taken because of reactive measures, right? So while detection helps prevent further unauthorized access, it does not stop the initial breach. And this is how IOA differs, right? In an indicator of an attack, we're proactively looking to detect the behavior before they're fully executed, right? So let's take an example here. A security team detects a standard employee account attempting to establish RDP communication, right? RDP communication to multiple internal servers, that's an unusual behavior. So the indicator of attack that was identified is that it's a non-administrative user. It's initiating multiple RDP connection. It could potentially be stolen credentials. The account could be logging in from an unknown location, right? There are unusual commands that are being executed to dump credentials from memory. Again, these are all clear indications of an active attack. In this case, the SOC team can isolate the machine, investigate the login attempts. They could look at indicators of credential theft or lateral movement. The advantage here is that we can stop the attack before significant damage was done, right? So the conclusion that I drive from this is there's a clear difference between IOC-based attack vector, IOA-based attack detection, and while IOCs help organizations respond to past incidents, IOA enables real-time threat hunting and proactive defenses. Now, let's go and look at some tools and techniques. Keep in mind that effective threat hunting requires the right combination of tools and techniques to proactively detect and neutralize your threats before they cause harm. Traditional security solutions alone are not enough. So we need to continuously evolve our tactics. We need to continuously evolve our security controls so we can detect and respond to innovative, unconventional attack vectors, right? So we look at some of the techniques that are common in threat hunting. We start with building a hypothesis-driven threat hunting. We talked about it earlier. We then look at anomaly-based detection, behavior-based detection, threat intelligence-driven hunting, and last but not the least is the machine learning and AI-based threat detection. So if we talk about hypotheses-driven threat hunting, it's a structured approach where the analyst would develop or use established framework to identify what tactics, techniques can guide their investigation, right? Ideally, they use the MITRE ATT&CK framework for this. The method is based on the assumption that attackers may already be inside your network. They might already be residing on your systems, right? So you're searching for signs of compromise rather than waiting for an alert to trigger by leveraging known adversary tactics and techniques, right? We then look at anomaly-based detection. This is a crucial role in identifying unusual behavior. So this method monitors system activities from any deviation from normal patterns. For example, if there's a sudden spike in outbound traffic for an employee who's accessing sensitive data at an unusual time of the day, right? So this technique particularly is effective in detecting previously unknown threats that do not match existing attack signatures, right? Or new attack patterns that do not match the baseline normal defined for that entity or for that asset. Now, we can also look at behavior-based analysis. Instead of looking at static indicators like file hashes, known malware IPs, we're looking at patterns of malicious activity. So we're looking at repeated failure events. So we're looking at repeated fail login events. We're looking at elevation of privileges. We're looking at lateral movement. We're looking at security tools being disabled, right? Or suspicious scripts or files being executed on a system, right? This is more understanding the behavior of a system and does it match any known attack vectors. We can also look at threat intelligence driven threat hunting, which means that we're looking at emerging threats. We're looking at real world threat data. We're looking at advisories by different vendors. We're looking at a combination of IOCs and IOAs. We're basically learning from what's happening in the World Wide Web, right? And what's happening with our in our industry. We're looking at threat intelligence sources to see what are the active attack vectors, right? What tech stack is being targeted, right? What are some of the trending vulnerabilities which might impact us as well? And then last is the machine learning and AI-based detection, right? Using next generation tools, we can analyze vast amount of security data. We can use predictive analytics to identify early warning signs of an attack. We can look at unusual patterns, abnormal system behavior. Machine learning algorithms can be used to identify new threat vectors, can be used to make advanced persistent threat attackers known, so looking at their behavior over time, right, and uncovering other sophisticated attacks. The idea is to combine all of these techniques, combine all of these various techniques that we can incorporate to build a reactive security model rather than a proactive, to move away from a reactive security model to a more proactive security model, right? Now, just those techniques alone is not going to work for us, right? We need certain tools to provide that deep visibility into the systems, into the network, such as a SIEM, a security information and event management tool, such as an EDR, such as a behavioral analytics platform. So when we talk about a SIEM, we're trying to aggregate and analyze vast amount of data, vast amount of logs to help identify anomalies and correlate different events across the organization. So we're looking at suspicious patterns. We're looking at data that is coming in from my firewalls, from my servers, from my endpoints, and correlating them by building specific SIEM correlation use cases. Now, in this case, there's no one standard SIEM solution that you need to use. You can use Microsoft Sentinel, you can use 40SIEM, you can use Palo Alto XOR, you can use Splunk, you can use IBM Curator. There's no limitation on what tools you can use as long as you have that function within your organization. Same goes for an EDR. An EDR is critical for monitoring activity on individual devices, on individual end user systems and servers, right? EDR focuses on monitoring and protecting your workstations and servers. They look at suspicious behaviors, malicious file executions, unauthorized file modifications. You can use next generation EDR tools like CrowdStrike, Microsoft Defender, Sentinel-1, right? These are some of the more trusted and widely utilized EDR solutions in the industry today. And let's not forget the threat intelligence platform, right? So threat intelligence platform allows us to stay ahead of evolving threats. You can integrate external threat intelligence sources, which complement or adds to your attack data, right? You can identify known adversary tactics and techniques. You can use tools like Recorded Future, which provides real-time threat intelligence from open sources and dark web monitoring. You can use Anomaly Threat Stream, which aggregates and analyzes global threat intelligence feeds. You can use Threat Connect, which combines intelligence, analytics, and automation for proactive threat defense, right? There's no limitation on what type of sources you need as long as you have an active threat intelligence source feeding in external attack data that you can learn from. We also have the network traffic analysis, right? Looking for unusual patterns in network communication, looking for unauthorized data transfer, unauthorized command and control activity, identifying that lateral movement by analyzing NetFlow data. Again, you can use tools like Cyglass, ExtraHop, Cisco StealthWatch, Darktrace, right? The idea is to understand deep network behavior, have that network visibility to detect advanced threats. And last but not the least is forensics and malware analysis, right? You can look at in-depth memory dumps. You can look at malicious files. You can look at other artifacts that would identify the impact of an attack, right? You can examine specific artifacts from a security incident. You can look at malware samples. You can look at system logs, and you can use specific forensics tools. And Sandeep, if you can shed some light on what some of those tools, what are some of the tools we can use, and how we can kind of utilize forensics tools for better threat hunting.
Of course, I guess the forensics tools come into play when your EDR has failed to prevent a threat or detect it, right? So that's when you actually engage your IR team, and that could be because of a lack of an EDR in your environment. If you're still using a traditional AV, so it's fairly common that you have an infected machine, and now you need to know what are the common indicators coming out of that attack that you're looking at. So the IR team in the past would bring out their forensic tools, tools like Autopsy or FTK Imager or CAPE or something like that. What I want to highlight is that now most of the modern EDRs, they do include that functionality. It may be a separate line item or a module you would have to acquire, but that exponentially increases your capability, right? So in the event where you have an EDR, not a traditional AV, but the EDR failed to detect something and you suspect there's something wrong with the machine because it crashed or somebody updated it and you don't, it's not normal. So that's where you would go and leverage the module that is built in with the same agent that already runs, pull the forensic data out of it and do deep dive onto it. And there are different ways how you can do that. For memory analysis, you can use WinPMEM, volatility, a bunch of other tools available. I also want to comment on that on the network traffic analysis side. What I find is a lot of our customers and a lot of organizations are very strong in detecting the north-south traffic when it comes to identifying malicious behaviors and patterns. What they lack is the lateral movement internally, right? The east-west traffic. So you mentioned Cyglass, and they're one of our partners and one of the tools we extensively leverage. The way they operate is they're ingesting net flows from your core switch. And if there's anything that is traversing your internal or laterally moving east-west, whether from dev to prod or DMZ to internal network, it can easily catch that. It can easily give us the visibility and identify those scenarios we talked about, unusual RDP connection coming from dev to prod, right? Something like that that you don't normally expect. There is no shortage of tools, and again, we're not here to change your opinion about one tool or the other. The idea is you should have some of the right tools, and there are a lot of open source tools available as well. Use whatever you have available as long as you have the expertise to do that.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Sandeep. Now, I know threat hunting relies on data, and without the right sources, without the right data, your team would be blind to potential threats lurking in your environment. So let's look at some of the data sources that we can benefit from, right? So endpoint logs. Endpoint logs are crucial because they detect suspicious system activity. We need the network traffic data, right? So as Sandeep mentioned, not just north-south traffic, but east-west for lateral movement. We need your authentication and identity logs, right? To monitor user access, login attempts, credential usage. We need the threat intelligence feed. Threat intelligence feeds provides known IOCs and attack behavior. And last, application and cloud logs, right? So it tracks activity in your SaaS application, in your cloud environment. Similarly, we need to integrate these data sources for effective hunting. So we need correlation through the SIEM. We need tracking of processes and execution of file activities through EDR. We need network flow and network analysis tool, and we need threat intelligence for deep dark web and external threat feeds. So now let's move on to our next section here, where we want to talk about some use cases, some threat hunting use cases, such as insider threats, advanced persistent threats, ransomware, and credential-based attacks. So one of the most challenging threats to detect is insider threat, right? Now, when we talk about insider threat, the key thing to monitor for is elevation of privileges, right? Also look for abnormal access patterns, look for large amount of data transfer, look at your authentication and identity logs to identify unusual login behavior. Cross-reference against threat intelligence to see if there is any outbound traffic to known malicious sites, right? Look for use of cloud storage solutions. Monitor any evidence of data being available on the deep dark web. Next, we talk about the ransomware detection, right? So one of the most damaging cyber threats is encrypting of your critical files and then having a threat actor demand ransom payments in return. So you're looking for pre-encryption activities, right? So you're looking for any attempts to disable backups. You're looking for any attempts to delete shadow copies. You're looking for any attempts to encrypt files in bulk. EDR can help identify file modifications. EDR can help identify malicious script executions. So those could be the tools that you can use to discover those threats. Next, when we talk about advanced persistent threats, we're looking for low profile attack movements. We're looking for command execution, lateral movement, privilege escalations, and communication to command and control, right? We're looking at unauthorized use of encryption. We're also mapping the behavior using MITRE ATT&CK framework, so we can identify tactics, techniques, and procedures that are used. And last, credential theft and account compromise, right? So we're looking for multiple failed login attempts from various locations. We're looking at password spray attack. We're looking at large number of accounts being locked out, administrative accounts being locked out, right? And this is where a SIEM tool is going to help you, right? Looking for suspicious remote access attempts, looking for unusual privilege escalations, right? We can also look for leaked credentials on the deep dark web. Again, all of this needs to be correlated together to understand if there is a risk of credential theft or accounts being compromised. Now, over the next few slides, we're going to talk about threat hunting in the cloud environment. Now, there are some challenges when we threat hunt in the cloud environment. We have limited network visibility. Cloud platforms typically do not support traditional network traffic monitoring. They rely on API-based log collection. So there are different approaches on detecting those threats. There are also shared responsibilities in the cloud, which means that there might be a security oversight, which may be split between the cloud provider and the customers, right? Meaning organizations must secure the configuration, must manage access controls and the data, while the cloud vendor is responsible for protecting the underlying infrastructure. We do see there's a dynamic and temporary workload in the cloud. Cloud environments can have short-lived instances and containers that frequently start and stop, making forensic analysis a little bit more difficult. And attackers can exploit these transient workloads to hide malicious activity, right? We also see that there is key data sources in cloud hunting, which are important. We need the cloud provider logs. So for example, AWS CloudTrail, Azure Monitor, Google Cloud Logging. We also need to monitor identity and access management logs. We need to identify unusual permission changes, role escalations, unauthorized account creations. We need to look for container and Kubernetes logs, right? We need to understand if there's any workload execution, again, privilege escalation within the container environment or any container breakouts. Last, I want to mention the SaaS application logs. The SaaS application logs, such as Office 365, Google Workspace, again, we need that to track user access, email activity, and API interaction. And then we have the cloud-specific threat hunting techniques, right? So we're looking for misconfigurations, misconfigurations in permissions, exposed storage, or open database. We're looking at API calls, right? API monitoring, API request logs are important. We're looking for unauthorized access attempts, excessive permission usage, privilege escalation attempts over API. We're also monitoring unusual user behavior, right? So cloud-based accounts, stolen credentials being used, suspicious login attempts, geographic anomalies, right? And lateral movement within the cloud environment. Sandeep, is there anything else you would like to add with regards to challenges or just threat hunting in the cloud in general?
Yeah, there is a lot, but I just want to do a quick time check. We got 12 minutes left, and I do want to make sure that we show everybody, some of the live demo that we have planned. So do we have enough time to go over this? Because I can cover those as part of the scenarios that I'm going to be doing.
Perfect, not a problem. I just want to quickly reflect on one more slide before we move into the live demo, which is leveraging AI in supporting your threat hunting activities, right? So different vendors have their AI, Palo Alto's Precision AI, which integrates with Palo Alto Cortex XDR. Then there's SentinelOne Purple AI, which is an autonomous security assistant, which accelerates the threat hunting process. There is the integrated Microsoft Copilot within Defender, within Sentinel SIEMs, and other Microsoft tech stack that provides real-time recommendations and automated playbook. CrowdStrike have their own Charlotte AI. Again, the idea is to leverage the tools that are available to you, especially AI tools that can enrich and enhance your threat hunting activities. And with that said, I'm going to hand it over to you, Sandeep, for some threat hunting cases, and I know you have a live demo for us as well.
Yep, sounds good. And we're going to talk more about the AI piece, because I know we've all jumped on the ChatGPT Gen AI bandwagon, but I find the true value of AI within the way the vendors have implemented into their own products. And some of the demos we're going to do, I'm going to show you live how we leverage it actually. So let's go to the next slide, Tyler. There are three scenarios that we have. Can you go to the next slide? Sorry. Oh. You stopped sharing. And I can't hear you anymore. That's okay.
Can you see my slide now?
Yes, perfect. I just wanted to quickly go through so that we set the stage and the context as to what we're looking at here. So the three scenarios that we're talking about here are threat hunting in the cloud. This is a very recent threat that we have discovered and identified. There was an advisory published, by a security organization, I think Security, not mistaken. And what this is the fast HTTP is a Golang library, and it basically speeds up your HTTP request process up by a factor of 10. And threat actors have obviously figured out a way to leverage this to their advantage, where they're doing an extensive brute force, and they've launched a brute force campaign against Microsoft Office 365, targeting specific APIs and endpoints to, for organizations that haven't fully implemented MFA or that have some break glass accounts. So this has given them, again, a renewed purpose of trying to break into Microsoft, and from there pivot into different, environments, into where your critical data is stored in OneDrive, SharePoint. So we're going to show you how we're doing the threat hunting for this scenario in our SIEM platform. Next slide is a traditional, compromise of your of your endpoint, where somebody, it's not an uncommon scenario, somebody in finance or accounting or even in IT, clicks on a malicious link, a suspicious link that they're not aware of, and now you have, a CNC agent or a beacon running on your machine, constantly communicating back, and then doing whatever it's supposed to do, exfiltrate credentials and data. We're going to show that as well live in the platform. And the last scenario we have is on the threat intelligence side, how we're leveraging some of our commercial tools, Record the Future, CyberInt, to do threat hunting there. Perfect, Alan, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we don't skip over the slide. I believe there was a question about these slides being shared. We will, if I'm not mistaken, correct? We're going to share those slides.
That's right, and the recorded session posted as well.
Okay, I don't think I can. How do I share my screen here? I can still see yours.
I just stopped sharing, so you can go ahead and start.
All right, excellent. I got it. Use the main screen. Let me know if you're able to see it.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, excellent. So this is our we have a demo FortiSIEM environment, and we have our flagship security service product that is powered by FortiSIEM. And this is the first scenario we're going to look at. So as I mentioned, this is all happening in Office 365. So obviously the requirement here is to get the Entra ID logs, and they're all done through the Office 365 Management API. It's a pretty robust API that we have been using quite extensively to collect all sorts of data from this environment. So here you can see it's not just authentication logs, but actually activity that is happening. So things like emails being sent, files being uploaded, downloaded from OneDrive, SharePoint. So a lot of this data is available through that API that we're collecting. In the interest of time, I've actually run a few of these queries. What we're looking for is our indicator here is the fast HTTP. Okay, that's the string that we are looking for. Now, as I mentioned, fast HTTP is a Golang library or a package that speeds up your authentication process. So it shows up as a user agent. And what I've found in my, some of the incident response we've done, threat actors are just as lazy as you and I, right? They don't go through the effort of updating it. It's pretty easy to do, right? It's not rocket science. You can change that user agent. But this is a pretty low-hanging fruit that if I just search for that, if I get any hits, I know that the threat actor is acting in my environment. So all I did was did a quick search for looking for in my raw log, because I don't know if that attribute is being parsed or not. And again, this is where you need to be aware of the tools you're using. So like in Splunk or QRadar, you would have a different attribute to look for. In our case, I do see some failed logins and some successful logins as well. So that, again, failed logins are fine, they're expected, but if I see success, that's something that I'm a little bit more cautious and worried about, because now I need to know who the user is and what has been done. So next we go and we expand our search, start looking for into raw event logs. Here we can actually see the raw data, and we can try to find out which user accounts are involved in this. So typically the user ID is available. Now, if you see not available, that essentially means in this test environment that we have enabled MFA. So if you read through this, it essentially doesn't include the username in that log, because it's interrupt from Microsoft that, hey, you need to provide an MFA token. Now you might ask that, okay, am I affected if I use MFA? No, because at that point, what the threat actors have been doing is they have been using MFA bombing as a method. So they can straight brute force you, and if they find your password, your end users will keep getting those MFA prompts. And if it's a simple push notification, they might even click yes on it. And that's all the threat actors are looking for. But if you have proper MFA implementation where you can do push, you're just writing as well, you have to actually put in a number, then you can see that. So I have a couple of user accounts that are actually compromised here that were listed. So let me go find that. And the next thing would be that once you know which user accounts there are, then you're going to expand your search with those user accounts right here. That's my ID, my test ID that I was using earlier. So now I know, and then I go and search for all activity that has been performed by that user account. So going back to my original search of looking at what different type of activities, files accessed, data copied, emails sent out from that account. And again, from there, you probably would want to involve your IR team as well, isolate the user. At Strategem, we are big proponents of automation. So we leverage FortiSOAR as our SOAR automation platform, and we can automate the user, disabling the user account, resetting the session, and all those activities from there. There are other indicators that were published as part of this, and those indicators were just public IPs. So public IPs as an indicator, is difficult because they can change, and there were actually literally thousands of IPs that were listed. So it's not realistic to search for something like that. You might want to focus your hunt on something that is unique that shows up. So as I said, flash HTTP is one method that to look for. And once you find one single event, there are a lot of things that you can look for within that event, right? And then you can just pivot and do a quick search in your own logs looking for those other attributes, right? Like, okay, is this relevant? Is this pertinent? Next, we have our, again, we're showing here this live demo on our SentinelOne platform, but this can be done in CrowdStrike, it can be done in Microsoft EDR or any other FortiEDR, any other EDR platform you use, right? So what we have here is in our lab environment, we have a Windows server that is playing the role of an end user or a workstation. Somebody gets an email, accidentally clicks on it, or they're just curious what it is about, clicks on the link, it drops PowerShell. And in this case, we're demoing it with PowerShell Empire. It's a post-exploitation framework. For those not familiar with it, it's an open source tool, and it gives you full capabilities, right? So it has a lot of capabilities built in, like it can use obfuscation and all that to make sure that it goes undetected. So in this case, I had to disable a lot of prevention capabilities of SentinelOne to demonstrate this. But here we're looking at different events that are coming in, and it's all the telemetry data. So as an analyst, we go through these and look for unusual things that we suspect might be related to an attack. So again, in the interest of time, I have a simple query that I created. And that query is just looking for, our hypothesis here is that, hey, am I looking for, I want to look at all the encoded PowerShell commands in my environment that are running. And okay, it's common to see them. Sometimes you would see legitimate use cases where legitimate applications are running encoded commands. In this case, there's a lot that is happening here. There's a significant amount. I don't know if it is good or bad, but it looks like base64 encoded. So I can go into base64 decode, paste that PowerShell command, and then just look for and try to decode that and see what exactly is the output of that. And if there is anything suspicious in here, it doesn't look normal, right? So I can see download HTTP. So based with the obfuscation that it is using, it broke down all the different strings so that your traditional AV can't catch it. And you can see there's an IP listed here that can be used. We know a port. We can see a lot of other artifacts from this that would indicate that this was indeed malicious in nature. From here, we can pivot and we can do, again, deep dive, try to find out, okay, what account ran that script and what else we can do from there. And there's a lot of information that will be available. And then again, I talked about the AI piece, right? So that's definitely something that you can do. And I'm keeping an eye on the clock here because we're almost out of the racetrack. But you can ask simple questions like, hey, are there any encoded PowerShell scripts running in my environment? And you should get an output pretty quickly, a query that you would be able to use and then pivot from there. So this is, again, what I meant by the true power of, yes, ChatGPT is one way of fixing your English and grammar, but this is how it can actually show you what data is pertinent. And this obviously ran for the last 30 days. If I were to say last 7 days, it would come back with the result that I showed you on the next screen. And quickly, the last one is I want to talk about the threat hunting piece with threat intelligence. This is where we're leveraging our commercial tools like Recorded Future, CyberInt, where we're doing threat hunting for our organization domains and our attributes. You can do all of those manually. You can look for specific things on the deep web, dark web. I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I'm just gonna go ahead and run the a few simple question, ask a few simple questions through the natural language processing engine here with the within recorded feature. It's already included here in the Ask AI. And yeah, it comes back with there are no results found. And what it is looking for is a domain watch list that just shows that, hey, I'm looking for the stratagem domain in there. So there are, again, what I found and I personally use here is these AI tools, if they're available to you, use them, give them to your analysts because they can level the playing field. You don't have to have, ninja expert analyst tier one who knows how to use the query language in Sentinel-1, in CrowdStrike, in Defender. They can ask these questions through the AI and get an output pretty quickly and then just pivot from there. The only drawback and unfortunate part here is most of them are paid, so you have to buy them as a separate license. And but if you can get through that hurdle, I think this can definitely, it's a game changer for your analysts. I know we're out of time. We went over a couple of minutes, but I don't know, Tala, do we have time to go over some questions?
Absolutely. Nisreen, do we have any questions that we can quickly go over?
There are a few questions that for those who are going to stay for the duration, we're also going to be recording this. So one question comes in here from Joaquin Lima. She says, what tool can be used to detect old versions and possible vulnerabilities we might have in our environment, including VMs, appliances such as SANs, backup software, data recovery appliances?
So again, that would be a part of the asset discovery. Most likely you would want to use something like Qualys, or again, there are different tools that are available, but Qualys comes to mind because as part of this would be part of your vulnerability management program. So you could, use their asset discovery feature, and it's Qualys, Rapid7, Nessus, they all do that. So you can actually discover and do some fingerprinting of the different legacy technology you might have. And it can give you an inventory that you can use that information to figure out, what technology is available, is present in your environment and what relevant vulnerabilities exist for them, and then patch them accordingly.
Perfect. Next question here from Perry Minhas. Is any tool preferred or best in class for AI analytics that you recommend? I know tricky to say to people, but we as an MS shop, but heard issues with Copilot as you displayed.
Again, Copilot, I love that product as well. Again, given that the visibility Microsoft offers, so with the right licensing, it can definitely give you that holistic view across your entire ecosystem of Microsoft products you use, right? You're using your Defenders, their cloud apps, you're using Purview for compliance. So Copilot can tie all of that together into a single story. I've seen a live demo. I don't personally have a preference because, again, I'm not here to propose any specific tools. All those stratagems as an MSSP, we have our preference and our partners that we work with. But the idea here is that you want to do threat hunting with whatever tools are available to you. And if you find them that they're limited, then I recommend that you figure out other alternatives that could be evaluated for future use.
All right, two more here and we'll close it out. So just from Mohammed and from Martin, just giving you guys some accolades. Really, really enjoyed the presentation. Really like the examples on different AI hunting. And the last question is from Jeffrey Notch. I think that's how you pronounce it. He says, have you ever seen an EDR platform that is capable of performing adequate SIM SOAR functionality? I'm wondering if the SIM of the future is natively part of the EDR-XDR.
That's absolutely true. And again, all the partners that we work with, Sentinel-1, Defender, and CrowdStrike, they are all coming with their own offerings for SIM because they realize that you can't really do full proper monitoring of a customer's environment with just endpoint logs, right? So you have to combine network visibility, you have to pull in SaaS logs. So they all have their own offerings. What we have found is that, again, while these capabilities are available, these solutions can become quite cost prohibitive, right? And this is where what are some of the solutions that we are leveraging because we operate on a different model. We ingest everything in our FortiSIM platform, and because we host it, we have deployed it in our own environment. We're able to leverage those tools and ingest everything at a very, in a cost-efficient manner. But again, that doesn't mean I'm trying to discourage you from those. If you're already invested in one of those tools, you can talk to your rep, you can talk to us. We would love to, have the conversation with you, how you can use whether CrowdStrike, their next-gen SIEM, whether it's SentinelOne or Microsoft Sentinel. The names are confusing, sorry, but yeah, I meant SentinelOne as in their own SIEM as well. So they are all offering these capabilities where they can ingest data from all third-party tools and give you that holistic view.
All right, well, with that being said, I want to thank everybody who attended this webinar today, including the 34 who stayed on to listen to the Q&A. We'll have this recorded and sent out to the entire few hundred of you that registered. So thanks again. We will be joining you guys again at the end of every month with a new topic on stratagems demonstration of thought leadership. So with that being said, everyone have a great rest of your day, and we'll chat again. Take care. Bye.
Thank you very much.